This is an after-school program podcast.
Welcome to the Home Studio Hangout podcast, where we explore what it's like building, running, and working out of a home studio with your hosts, Jo-shua and Matotek, Andrew Simmons, and many guests in different areas of the music industry.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 3 of the Home Studio Hangout podcast. Me and Josh are both stoked that you're here today. We have a great conversation about defining the roles between a songwriter, a producer, and a mix engineer. We're really stoked to talk about these and help you define for yourself and also for the client's sake what those roles are, how you fit within those, whether you do one of them or all three. Being able to define what you do is always great for clarifying your role in each project. So, without further ado, let's get right into the episode. Welcome back to podcast episode 3. I am Andrew. Drew, welcome back. We're happy to have you. This is my co-host, Joshua.
I'm Josh.
Or Josh.
Or Joshua.
If you've listened to the past 2 episodes, congratulations. You've listened to us talk for way more than we expected you to, and we thank you for that.
Which is why today is not going to be nearly as long.
Or
so we say at this moment.
Yeah, at time of podcast recording.
At the time of just like last time.
Yep.
And we still have to do the other half to last time's episode.
Exactly.
And we decided we're not going to do it tonight.
Nope,
because we can't bore you that bad 2 episodes in a row.
We're going to have some fun today. We're going to be talking about producing and mixing and what exactly is the difference between those. So it's a little more of a, shall we say, cerebral kind of thought process episode. We do have some like more factual things to kind of go through with producing, but like it's going to be talking about kind of the differences that we see and kind of the things that, you know, define the jobs of producers and mixers, and where producers and mixers kind of bleed into other aspects of the music industry also. So
Yeah.
Let's get right in. So, what is a producer and what is a mixer, Josh?
So a producer is someone who produces. And a mixer. No. So producing and mixing are both very common things, as one would say. Mm-hmm. But producing and mixing are vastly different. Andrew and I both produce. Andrew and I do not mix a whole lot. We do some mixing work, but it's not like our bread and butter.
No.
And so producing is going to be most of the creative choices that have to do with the composition, the recording, even post-production, like sound design, while mixing is simply making everything sound good regardless of where you listen to it. So we're going to dive more in depth because that's super broad.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, producing is more creative. Mixing is more calculated.
That's a good way to say it. Yeah, I think those are good. Those are good 30,000 foot views of both of those things. Yeah, so let's go through. So, talking about some of the specifics of producing. So let's take it back. Way back to the time of Motown, right? To the time of, what is it, like
the Beatles.
Yeah, all this, like, I guess all of the. I mean, yeah, it happened the same with them.
Yeah, because I mean, it was huge. Like, a lot of people will talk about how, and this is going to be awful, I don't know the big producer for the Beatles, but like whenever they released all those crazy songs like Tomorrow Never Knows and stuff like that, everyone was always like, oh, it was the producer, it wasn't the band.
Yeah. So
So that's in my opinion, that's a good example.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So going back, there are sometimes a producer can really like really make the artists what they are. So we're going back to like the Motown era. There was a time in the Motown era where you had these guys that would put together these teams of guitar players, drummers, entire bands, and then mixing engineers, your mastering engineers, maybe some songwriters, some top liners, whatever it looked like kind of in that day. And then also your recording engineers, because that was a separate thing. That the producer back then had nothing to do with really the actual process of recording. A producer in this sense is very much like a project manager, is a very good way to think about it, like in more modern terms. But back then as a producer, they would find these young artists and, you know, nobodies, like off the side of the street or in some church. They would go hear them sing, and they would be like, oh man, that person has a super unique voice, or that person's got like star power, but we just need to refine them. So they grab them, they sign them some really terrible contract and for a lot of money, and they go in and they start recording and writing all their songs and everything, and they make them stars. But they don't touch really the actual recording process, which is like kind of different from all of the other producer roles we're going to be talking about. So that is, in my mind, that's like the earliest, the producer in the earlier senses is very much like an executive producer role. So an executive producer, and even in today's terms, handles a lot of the budgets, a lot of the timeline, a lot of the scheduling with the studio, with the session musicians, where the stems need to go, getting printed, whether they need to go, vocals need to go to the guy that's going to be tuning them, the drums need to go to the guy that's going to be editing them, when they need to be back to the mix engineer, stuff like that. And keeping it to the timeline, because generally the executive producer is the person that reports to the label. They're that liaison between the label and the artist and the team. So they're kind of building the team, but from a monetary standpoint. And then the other side, which is more of the modern side of things, is the session producer, which is what we kind of know as like a producer. So part of that stays the same. The team building aspect definitely stays the same. So I know for me, producing projects from a like team building side of things, I always have in mind, who am I going to have master this? If I'm not mixing it, who is? If I'm not tuning the vocals, who is? If the budget calls for the ability to be able to, outsource a bunch of different things, like I start calling people up, making sure that like they're available, prices are done. I know I'm building that team together to make the project be the best that it can be. And then we go to the creative instrumental choices. So also a session producer is really that guy. I don't know if you've ever like watched a lot of like older like documentary footage. The session producer, that guy that's sitting on the couch in the back, just kind of like sitting there, like bobbing his head to the music, or just like sitting here like this, like just listening really, really, really intently. And then he'll go like, "Oh, stop. We need to redo that take." Or, "Oh, stop. We need to rewrite that part." Or just, stuff like that. But like all of the tones, the parts, a lot of the creative choices, they have a big say in. And this is something, and the next one is something that I'm going to let Josh talk about. This is very much they kind of end up becoming a vocal coach a little bit too, with all of the vocalists, but also with when it comes to part writing and stuff like that as well.
They sure do. So, yeah, for as far as like vocal work goes, a lot of producers, have to work with artists who don't necessarily have like the vision for what the record needs, right? So at that point, you're going to have these producers who step in and they're going to essentially put themselves in the artist's shoes and coach them through the process of how they need to track a vocal. For instance, if you had Katy Perry sing how she did on Teenage Dream and you put her on everybody knows Green Day. So, you put her on something like Boulevard of Broken Dreams, right? Had her sing it just like Teenage Dream. You'd be like, man, dude, like this song sucks, Is the vocalist still good? Yeah, objectively, that vocalist is incredible, but it doesn't fit the song. And so that's whenever a producer might have to take on the role of a vocal producer, or there are people who are specifically vocal producers, especially in pop anymore, because a lot of these people are getting tracks from a third party and, they are then sent out for production. And then by the time it's all done, they're like, all right, time to track vocals. Let's have this vocal producer work with this artist because they're a good fit. They've worked together in the past. And then the vocal producer will sit there, make sure the artist is comfortable, talk to them about, like what the song means to them, how they can relate to it even more, maybe if they didn't write it, and then literally just take it line by line and be like, well, you need to dig into this more with your diaphragm, you need to sing this part like this, you need to sing that part like that. And it's really all about making sure that the vocal is convincing, because nobody likes listening to a song and thinking, man, this sounds inauthentic,
for sure.
Yeah, and so whether it's the same person who's doing the team building and the creative instrumental choices, or whether it's just somebody who's literally just a vocal producer, having that skill is huge. A huge one is going to be Louis Bell, blew up with Post Malone. I'm sure he had bigger work before that too, but everybody, including me, knows him for Post Malone. But at this point, I would say he's pretty much known for being a vocal producer, and he also does work on the tracks. He works on the tracks a lot, but the fact that he is able to work with all of these different artists and specifically do vocal work, and they all hit number one, really goes to show like how impactful a vocal producer is. Because at the end of the day, I could sing everything in the world, but if it's not convincing, it's not going to connect.
Because he did that Ozzy feature on that Post Malone track, which got him that Ozzy record, wasn't he? I believe it was the Ozzy record. He ended up doing some of the vocal production on because of that, and he probably worked on some of those tracks too.
He worked on Havana. He worked with Halsey on a few songs. He worked on Sucker by the Jonas Brothers.
Oh, heck yeah.
That song's huge. Like that dude, I remember like last year, we were like halfway through the year and he already spent like a year and a half on the charts because he had so many songs charting in the top 10.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, it's crazy. And all he does is he'll literally sit down and plug a C800G into a UAD Apollo Twin. The same thing that we have here minus the $10,000 microphone. And,
yeah, exactly.
It really goes to show where like it's really not about the gear. It's about the person, and being able to work with somebody who really can get inside of somebody's head and relate and show them how to do things is huge. And that's something I have to do with my artists a lot, especially whenever I'm writing everything. It's crazy because I have to tell people how to sing things that I can't relate to, You know, I never had a relative commit suicide. You know, I've lived a pretty easy life, you know. So I have these artists who come to me and they want to write about these pretty heavy topics. And even though I'm writing all the lyrics and the lyrics are connecting with people, I have to make sure their vocal performance does, because it's hard singing someone else's words, you know?
Yeah. No, for sure. I will say, like you said, that a big part of that is that can be an individual's job. And this is the other thing I want to take note of. Everything that we're talking about can also just be an individual's job.
Yep.
The team building aspect, like I said before, like old school wise, that was literally just a one person job. They would build the team, and by building the team, they got credits, and they would build the team, and that includes finding the artist. They would build the team as far as the session and everything, bring in the artist, team built, they get paid, and royalties forever. Creative instrumental choices. Like, there are guys that just get brought in to produce guitars, or just get brought in to produce drums. Like, I've hired people just to produce drums for stuff. Like, that happens all the time.
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about JJ Watt, right?
Yeah.
That's his name, right?
I don't remember.
And he had a few decent cuts like within the past few years, but then he started, or no, not JJ Watt. That's a
JJ Watt's the football player.
Dude, we're gonna have to cut this out. I don't watch football. I'm a hockey fan. Let's go Pens. No, dude, we gotta cut this out. I can't have my friends are gonna listen to this.
He's a Texan.
And they're gonna be like, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe that Josh is this bad." His name's Andrew Watt. I should remember that.
Okay. So we were talking about Andrew Watt.
Yeah, and so this guy is interesting because he didn't have a whole lot going on in his early years, I guess. And he had like a few like kind of B-side moments with like Justin Bieber, and he did some pretty cool things, but then where it really started is whenever he started doing more like the live instrument stuff with Post Malone. And from there, it was just like one after another, and within 5 years, this guy now has so many huge cuts. He worked on the majority of the Ozzy record, which is insane.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely insane. And what this guy primarily does is he works on guitar-based music in the pop world. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people would be like, "Oh, pop music? No, that's impossible." But no, it's a thing. And, you know, it's like if I have, you know, major label budget and I'm shooting for a number one and I need someone to write guitar, I already know I'm going to call up Andrew Watt, not to be confused with JJ Watt, the NFL player.
Yeah.
So, dude, I'm so mad that I did that.
That's
I probably, you know, I was probably thinking of like J Cash. I don't know. All these writers have cool names. Why doesn't he have like something crazy cool, you know?
He's just like, yeah, Andrew Watt.
Andrew Watt.
Whatever. But yeah, no, like having guys be specific, like him specifying in, I mean, it's pop guitar. That's like what he does is pop guitar music. He is but he doesn't always just play. Like, I'm sure he writes parts for other people and the other people end up tracking, or you know what I'm saying? Like, he's a producer in his own right in that way too. And I'm sure he works with synths that also like complement the guitar and things like that too. Which actually gets us into the next one, which is another individual job that we both do, which is post-production and effects work.
One of my favorite things.
That is so. And if you don't know, if you're not like, if you're kind of newer to everything, what we're talking about, post-production would be like all of the added synths, any added production work when it comes to like adding vocal chops. A lot of the time, some of this stuff is done beforehand. But sometimes, like I've done 3 tracks in the last like week that I've added vocal chops and verses just because it was more of a rock song, but it felt like it could have used it, like, and it sounded really cool. Adding effects and doing effects work also, like manipulating different sounds to create risers, impacts, adding cymbal swells, like making synths double guitars, um, making sub basses double bass guitars, writing like MIDI bass parts that complement the song really well. Like all of that kind of falls into post production. It's a lot
Yep.
of and by literal definition, it is production that happens after the song has like been mostly completed.
Yep. That's pretty much all it is. It's like the little cherry on top,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And yeah, I do a lot of post production work as well. And I think you summed it up really well. You know, it's all this stuff that isn't the song. You know, I always want to say like guitar, bass, and drums, you know? But
Mm-hmm.
like if we're talking about like pop music, then it's everything that isn't the song.
Yeah, like
And
I did post production on a pop song last week, and a lot of it was like adding extra synth that I felt like filled out the space a little bit more, manipulating some vocals to sound really cool, to add like some extra edge or grit or transitional effects, or making the parts just kind of feel a little bit better in general, kind of meld a little bit better, but also adding some ear candy. Like that's a big part of it too, adding like these little counter melody lines and different little like sparkly synths up top to kind of, say, oh, that was really cool. Keep the synth interesting. Um Never mind, Aaron's in the shot. So good night. Love you.
hi, Aaron. Good night, Aaron.
And back. But adding anything that has to do with like adding little synths that have to do adding ear candy, all that kind of stuff. Kind of I completely lost my train of thought. It just went.
Oh, if we have to keep in JJ Watt, you got to keep in this brain fart.
Oh,
you're having.
I know, man. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's what I was talking about. Post production. So yeah, adding all of this extra ear candy, adding counter melodies, adding little sparkly things that kind of as you're listening, that originally it might kind of get a little boring, but because you added this little thing, it kind of keeps the song interesting. I think actually that's probably a huge part of post production, is making sure that the song stays interesting while staying true to what the song is, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
like not overdoing it
Mm-hmm.
and taking over the song. Yeah, because I've done that before. Actually, I did that this week. I like took a break from this song because I was kind of bummed out, and I went ahead, took a listen, and I was like, "Oh, this is bad." And so I
Yeah.
just tore everything down and I just built it from the ground up. And it's really about not finding things to just like make the song more interesting. It's what's about making the song better,
Mm-hmm.
and more cohesive. And
Exactly.
I like to call post-production sound design, simply for the fact that I look at it the same way that you would look at scoring a film, because it's not about giving background sounds to this already made piece of art. It's about accompanying it and making whatever is already there better.
That's a really good way to say it. Yeah. Making
Yeah,
what's
like
already there
it
better. Enhancing.
and if you exactly, and like you could watch any Christopher Nolan movie on its own and you're like, "Oh, it's an incredible movie." But as soon as you unmute the TV and you hear Hans Zimmer in the background, you're like, "Wow, this is a new experience,"
Yeah.
And God, they're both so good.
I
They're
know,
both
man.
so good. And yeah, so that's how I really look at post-production, sound design, whatever you want to call it. It's just
Yeah.
whenever you say sound design, it gets kind of confused with
with a lot
film
of
and video games.
film and scoring and video games. But I will say, a lot of sometimes you do kind of cross over into that world a little bit too. I know Chris from Under Oath, their keyboard player, scores a lot of movies and and video games, but he also does like a good chunk of the post production and writing also for their records, at least like nowadays.
Yeah, and like that's also, as I got more into post production, I also got more into the idea of scoring, because like that's something I would love to do now, because I realize like if an artist gives me some dead space and we're both on the same space, well, same wavelength, then it'll be something really, really cool. It'll be a new experience,
Yeah, and that also comes with working with either guys that know where to leave space for post production, but also guys that you are used to working with, and that's creating a rapport with producers and engineers that are working on projects that are saying, "Oh, well, I definitely know this sounds like a song that is gonna need Josh or Andrew's little extra 10% touch on this." I mean, all the time, it's like, here I've left you a good bit of room to just kind of play around, see what you like, add some stuff. I had a guy that I was working on one of the tracks last week say like, yeah, get a little bit weird with it, like get a little extra weird with it, because it's easier for me to dial it back a little bit than it is for me to make it extra weird.
Right. And dude, so how about this? This is so rare. An artist hit me up for the very first time to do post production for them, and they left me a 16 bar gap building up to like their big moment.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
I was like, is this real life? Like, there was nothing there, and I had a blast with it. It was so much fun. And because like whenever I'm writing and when I'm producing, it's very much like, it's not like I write a whole song on guitar. I'll write a lot of it on guitar, but then like I'm also going to go in and it's like, well, does the guitar need to be more interesting? Does the production need to be more interesting? And I always look at it as like give and take, and that's how I do it for everything, including how I write like top lines. It's give and take, between the track and the vocal, or the production and the track and the vocal. So whenever they did that, best time of my life, because I finally got to sit down and just like do my thing. Because, when I'm producing a track, it's different because I'm able to give that input beforehand. I'm like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that because I have a really cool idea and you need to hear it, and 9 out of 10 times the band is like, yeah, that's really cool, but like whenever you're just sent a whole track, you can't do that. You could suggest it, but in their mind, they already heard the song. It's already done. Yeah. So you're less likely to get that approval on it, because if they sent you a wave file, you can't just pull the guitars out.
Yeah, exactly. So this next point that we're going to talk about, this comes back to every single one of these as an individual. Like we said, post-production is a job all on its own. Vocal session, like coaching and vocal producing, is a job all its own. Instrumental producing, tones and parts, and that I would include beat making in that as well, is a job all on its own. That's probably the most popular, like well-known one as a producer. Like I said, team building is on its own a job. But what all of those things have to have in common is being an expert at communication. Because if you are not an expert at communication, one, you're not going to know what the artist or the person over the project wants from you. If you aren't an expert in communication, you aren't going to be able to take criticism very well. When somebody doesn't like what you add as a post-production guy, or if you're not, like, the vocal producer is a very good example of like being able to communicate well. That's everything for you as a vocal producer.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And like, it's something like I'm very blessed to be like the type of person that kind of knows how to communicate well. I worked in different jobs where that was my job. I would be on the phone all day.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be talking to people and I would be closing sales. And so it's like, how can I translate those skills to my business? And, it's helped me out a ton because, between that and then like some of the books I've read, like I understand like how people make choices, how people think. I was an artist, so I know what artists are insecure about, what they hate, what they're scared of, being able to understand all that and factor it into your language makes a huge difference because, not being able to communicate things properly will completely burn you out. And it's something that is learnable. It's 100% learnable.
Most definitely.
And yeah, so that's huge. And it's something that you really need to learn because, I've had times where I've had to explain to people how my rate works out,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The other day, someone was like,
that's a massive
how do I reply to somebody who just asked me to work for free? And I commented on it and I was like, well, unfortunately, like my rent and car payment aren't.
Yeah.
And then Seth ended up putting a comment underneath, like actually putting what he would tell somebody. And I was like, all right, to be fair, I did tell someone that once and they signed on to the job. 2, I typically don't do that. And I typically don't have to because of how I communicate before I get to my rate.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people, hey, look, my time's very limited. I only work with select artists that I see myself being a good fit on. We're going to have to book a call to make sure that we're a good fit for like my bigger projects. I don't do that for like, things with a quick turnaround time. But then whenever I get to the end of it and I'm like, yeah, it's going to be a lot of money, but enough that I'm not going to make minimum wage. The artist is like, cool, sign me up. And all of these people are like, man, how do you get people from not haggling your rate? And it's like, well, you have to set realistic expectations.
Mm-hmm. It's all about the
before they book that call, they already know it's not going to be cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And they also know that there's a chance I'll say no and I'll turn them down. And then there's also the chance that I'm not going to have time.
Oh, yeah.
So 9 out of 10 times, are all 3 of those going to actually happen? No, not at all. Typically I could start on things right away. Typically I could turn things around in a few days. Typically my rate isn't even super, super high. But the fact that I set those expectations and I'm communicating that effectively, whenever I tell them, it's going to be $1,000, they're like, okay, cool.
Yep.
And I send them over the contract, send them over the invoice, it's all signed, paid for, and I'm good to go. I'm good to start. And then because I told them my time's extremely limited and it might take me a while to get to, and I'll give you a discounted rate because it might take some time. But then whenever I'm able to give it to them in a few days, they're even more happy. Mm-hmm. And so it's just about setting expectations. And a lot of people are like, well, that's dishonest because it's not the truth. But the honest truth is I don't know what my life is going to be like,
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like, what if something, what if something comes up and it does take that long? I'm working on so much stuff right now. It's like, it very well could take me a few weeks,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm going to but like, if you're that willing to, pay me what I'm asking for, be a genuine human being, and also take the time to talk to me for like 45 minutes and have a great conversation, sure, I'll fit you in and I'll get it done, And like, that's what it's all about. It's just communication. And that's only one instance. That's just how I get people from not being like, will you work for minimum wage?
Yeah.
It's like, I'll be in a session where, I have to tell somebody how to sing a part, and sure, sometimes, I'll be joking. I'll be like, do you have a dog? Mm-hmm. And Dan was like, yeah. I was like, all right, pretend your dog just died and now sing that again. No. And then he gave me a great take.
Yeah.
And he was laughing as soon as it finished up because he thought it was hilarious. But like, there's other times where I have to like really put myself in their shoes and be like, all right, so you don't have enough support. And I'm not a vocalist. Like, I mean, I'm a vocalist, but I'm not like classically trained, Mm-hmm. And I have to explain to them what their body is doing, what they have to change. And then I have to also give them examples. So then now I have to do it too. And
Yeah.
it might not be the best sounding thing in the world, but the goal is to get them on track to give me the best thing possible. And yeah, so like communication, like that is more than just, speaking, formally. It's about speaking people's language, because
Yeah.
I'm always comfortable when somebody talks the way that I do. So I have to do the same to other people,
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it is. But then on top of that, you also have to remember that this includes being 100% transparent and understanding that everybody is always 100% of the time on the same page. Because if you have a pricing discrepancy, if you have a scheduling discrepancy, if you have a turnaround discrepancy, people are going to be angry, and rightfully so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, and that's your fault.
And it's all your fault. It's all your fault.
Yeah, it's not your fault, because you didn't do your part in fully communicating, fully explaining, and making sure that they understood every single aspect of this. Oh, well, I did. It comes up. Oh, well, I thought you were mastering, right? Oh, I thought that price included mastering. Well, I explicitly explained in this section that it does not. So I'm sorry.
Yep.
Or I'm producing a track and they're sending it off to somebody else to mix, and they didn't pay me for vocal editing or drum editing. Okay, well, I send it off and their mixer is like, none of this is tuned, or none of this is, these drums aren't edited at all. And the artist is like, well, why didn't you? Or I send them, I send the artist like a prep track before I send the stems to the mixer. And they're like, yeah, this just sounds like the drums sound a little off and the vocals are out of tune. Well, yeah, they are, because none of it's been edited, like, at all. And it's like, per what we talked about, like, I make that clear up front. Mm-hmm. Hey, here's what this comes with. Hey, this does not include vocal editing. So if you need vocal editing, like, I can do it. That will be extra. Or I can send you to some guys that, like, that's all they do are vocal edits. And same for drum editing. It's like, if you want me to do drum editing, awesome. Like, here's that extra fee. Or, if you want to go to a guy that specializes in your genre of music's drum editing, like, that's a pretty common thing. I'll send you to some of those guys, and they're great and they're awesome. And honestly, I would prefer sometimes to send that work to people, because I love, spreading the love with the family. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, don't lie. You just
everybody
don't like editing.
Everybody eats.
Everybody eats, and nobody edits.
And nobody likes drum editing.
I hate drum editing. I'm going to have to make that video about my hack for metal drum editing.
You should.
I was telling Chris about that, and he was all about it. So
yeah, we'll have to make something about that.
It's going to be sweet.
Go back to, I'm going to read this lift off again, but team building, instrumental, and creative instrumental writing and tone and part choices, as well as vocal, coaching, post-production effects work. None of those, like, those are kind of secondary. Your skills to those are honestly assumed. But if you can communicate really well, you are going to get 4 times as much work as any other producer out there, because you communicate honestly, upfront, quickly, or at least in a timely manner. And I will say, I will addendum that to in a timely manner, because you don't want to be up on your phone in the middle of the night responding to a client because they texted you in the middle of the night because they had a thought. Timely manner.
Yep.
Timely manner, we say. Timely manner.
Timely.
So, yeah, timely. But if you can communicate in those ways, they're going to come back to you every single time, because you were clear, you were concise. They knew exactly what you were getting. They knew, after having that first conversation with you, exactly, if they paid you, they knew exactly what they were going to get.
Yep.
And if they receive, and this is another conversation to have when we get to book stuff, but like if you set that expectation and then you immediately go above that expectation and you exceed that expectation, they're going to feel like they got a deal, and you're going to have a super happy client that's going to return every single time and tell all their friends.
Yep. And then on top of that, whenever you have recurring clients, you're now making friends.
Yeah, man.
A lot of the people I work with are simply friends who happen to pay me to produce their music and write for them, you know? And what that also does, especially if you're like writing, you get to know these people so well, you know, like Dan, I've been writing with him for over a year now, and we'll text each other just out of nowhere because it's a blast. And like, I feel like Dan's my little brother. It's incredible. My second little brother. I don't want Jacob to feel sad. I'm wearing his clothes right now. ParadiseHills.shop. And yeah, me and Dan, like, we're friends. You know, he just happens to pay me to write and produce for him. And it makes it a lot easier because now we're able to have this hard conversations. Whenever he wants to write a song about something super, super deep, he's able to open up to me, and I'm here to listen, and I get it, you know? And I'm not afraid to ask the hard questions to him either, you know? Because, you know, nobody wants to talk about, like, you know, something super, super tragic, right? I'm not going to bum you guys out, so we'll just say it, a tragedy. Nobody wants to talk about it. But for you to not only have to listen, but then also have to ask even deeper questions into that tragedy to fully understand it. If you walked up to a random stranger on the street and you're like, "Hey, did your father pass away?" And they're like, "Yeah." You're like, "What did that feel like?" They would run.
Yeah.
You know? And that's cruel. That's a cruel thing to ask somebody.
But
you
that's
know?
what we ask people a lot of the
But
time as vocal producers, especially.
People. Yeah, that's like what vocal producers do. Honestly, vocal producers just go get that degree in psychology, and you'll be straight. Like, because it's borderline there. And I've honestly thought about like taking like psych classes just to kind of understand like how people work
for sure
a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like you do have to ask these super hard questions, and it's something. I mean, do I like doing it? Sure, because it gives me a new perspective on life, but. Like I said, I wouldn't walk up to a stranger and say that.
Yeah.
I would never do that.
Well, and back to the psychology kind of thing is the communication part is essentially psychology at its most like, or maybe sociology or a combination of the two. In its like basic form, being able to understand how people tick in groups and how people like as a band. So if you're you know, talking to a band, how people interact inside that, how function inside that group, but also how people function as individuals, especially if you're talking to other producers or other songwriters or anything like that. Like, it's a little bit of marketing, but then again, like a lot of marketing is also just kind of psychology, which is
and
something
because
we'll
a lot
get
of
to.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a couple episodes on marketing because a lot of people think marketing is very like, you know, used car salesman kind of like a pitch, you know, but you know, for like up and coming brands or like people who are marketing, it's very much just understanding how people work, using that to your favor, and following through.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
So,
and that's how it is with anything. And it's kind of
sure.
weird because once you start thinking about this, you start wondering like, am I a serial killer? And, you know, because you really do have to understand how people think and how people make choices. And so you will use that to your advantage to get a yes, you know, whenever it comes to like an idea, because there's some bands who don't want any outside input, but you know this song is going to bomb, right? But you have this really cool idea. So you pitch it in a certain way that they're like, okay, give it a try. And then you give them reasons why it's better and reasons why their audience will think it better. And then all of a sudden
they like it.
Their song is so much better and they approved it. And now their song does better because of it. And like thinking that way is so calculated and like almost strange for most people.
Well, it's not the way people don't think that analytically.
Exactly. You know, like for our is it sociopaths or psychopaths
Yeah,
who think that way?
Sociopath is the one that can think of other. They're at least like kind of an empath still.
Okay.
A
Well,
psychopath
anyway.
is like serial killers.
Okay, so for our sociopaths out there who are listening to this, you get it. You're already almost there. All you have to do is fake it like you care,
Yeah.
and you will kill it.
Nah,
Like
if
you will
they're a
do.
true if they're a true sociopath, they can already do that.
That's true. Yeah, if you're a sociopath, you're already 10 steps ahead of us, or
Yeah,
are you?
exactly. Don't listen to this part.
And yeah, I mean, a lot of it is like social skills, and it's awful, for people who struggle with that. But like at the end of the day, it is learnable, and if you have to break it down into a more calculated form of thinking, then go for it. It's all about whatever works, So if you're the type of person where you're very much introverted, you hate having these conversations, but you're really really good at producing vocals, then work on yourself. See how you could push past that. If it's enough of an issue, go check out a therapist. I'm sure that they would help you.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And like, there's nothing wrong with getting help to help other people, And I hate saying like, oh yeah, it's learnable, because there's a lot of people out there where it isn't. But if it isn't, then that also means that you could get professional help to make it a lot easier.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that's the kind of tail end of the producer side of things. So I will say, none of the things that we have said have included vocal editing, have included drum editing, have included any kind of mix prep, have included mixing or mastering in any sense. Everything we've talked about so far is a really good definition of producing.
Yeah.
They're not. Yeah, this is kind of what, in my mind, this is what producing is, and I think you will probably agree with that. This is a
I agree.
fully fleshed out 45-minute explanation of what producing is.
The only other thing I could think of is that being a producer means that you're also anything else in certain cases.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's times where like when I'm doing remote production, that also means that like I'm the one tracking and editing guitars.
Yeah, and so that's where you get into start like blurring lines there. You know what I'm saying? That's where
and that's the issue with like the term producer nowadays. It's very much blurred, because like when I produce a track, it simply just means I'm not writing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, and like lines get blurred in the sense of like, okay, well, a lot of the times the producer might also be the mix engineer, or the producer might also be the guitar editor, drum editor, bass editor, vocal editor, or the producer might be doing everything we've talked about today and also doing the tracking aspect of it. Like they might also be the tracking engineer.
There's a lot of producers in the rock and metal world where you go to them, you work the songs out, and then he or she will record them, they will edit them, they will mix them, and they will master them. They'll do everything, And that's super common simply because like budgets are tight,
Yeah.
And whenever you've been doing it for 10 years, you're so quick, like what's it matter?
Exactly.
Or they could outsource the editing to somebody else and go get the record done even quicker,
Yeah,
so
for sure. So now let's get into kind of like mixing specifics. Like what do we consider, because we've talked about now in pretty lengthy about the specifics on what a producer is. Let's talk about a mix engineer or a mixer. What is
I think that this is actually going to be pretty easy.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty excited for that. So my definition of mixing is dynamic and EQ changes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's somebody who processes all of the tracks to enhance them to sound like a song.
Yeah, that's a good way to. That's a good.
I mean, it's not the worst explanation in the world.
No.
It's always kind of hard to explain what mixing is because we do it so much,
Yeah, no,
it's like,
that's true.
well, I run 3 compressors on my vocal chain. That's mixing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's very much, mixing to me is working with everything and getting everything to sound like a finished product. What mixing isn't to me is using effects or changing around tracks or anything like that. And so a lot of people don't understand that when you send something out for mixing, if you have a guitar that is completely dry and you label it ambient guitar, it's not the mixer's responsibility to toss reverb and delay on it, because that's not his place. If he feels like he needs to do it for the mix, he might do it. But, for the most part, drastic effects are not something that a mixer does.
Yeah.
Using reverb and delay, sometimes creatively, is sure.
Or to make things sit in a certain place. And also certain panning automations, like if it's a specific thing, like that's not a mixer's job really. That's a production choice.
Yeah.
To have things go pan from left to right at this time because it needs to land on this note when it's at the far right, like that's a production choice.
Exactly. And so I think that, for instance, if the producer sends a track to the mix engineer, they need to have a conversation because once again, communication is everything. And so the producer might say, hey, yeah, the room mics aren't that loud in the session that I sent you. The band wants a more roomy sound. So then he's going to bump up the room mics, might add some verb, things like that. Like you can mix creatively. You can absolutely mix creatively.
Yeah. I think
it's just whether or not the mix engineer is hired to do so. If you're working with somebody like, who's the guy that does Bring Me and 5 Seconds of Summer and
Dan Lancaster.
If you're working with someone like Dan Lancaster, I can guarantee you that he only works with the more technical side of mixing. If you were sending a session to him, that producer should have it so well done that it should even probably be a little pre-mixed. Where you could listen to the session and be like, yeah, like this is listenable, and it's probably better than most of our demos.
Yeah.
So, that's the reality. Whenever you're flying to Greece and working in probably the best studio in the world, you're going to leave there with a record that already sounds really good. Then you send it to a mix engineer who probably charges an absurd amount of money per song to make it that extra 10%. But that 10% is something nobody else could have given them, And so on the other hand of things, you do have times where bands will send DI guitars and MIDI drums and MIDI bass to a mix engineer, and then they're the ones who choose the guitar tones and stuff like that.
But generally, that's a predetermined
conversation.
That's generally a predetermined conversation, though.
But it's always a predetermined conversation.
Yeah.
If someone hired me to mix stuff, and whenever metal bands hire me to mix stuff, I always assume their guitar tones are going to be awful, so I tell them send me DIs. Because I literally spent 2 days last year making a ton of presets that I know I love, so I could flick through tones and pick my favorite one.
Yep.
It makes mixing a lot easier. But if an indie rock band sent me DIs, I'd be like, what did you just do?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you want these to sound like? And they're like, like Kurt Cobain, but with chorus. And I'm going to be like, no, dude, you do that on your own, you know?
Yeah.
And so mixing, and that's pretty much how mixing is everywhere. Like the song needs to be done. The creative choices need to be done. The mix engineer's job is to make it sound good.
Yep.
Besides maybe like rock and metal is where they do the whole like replacement mixing.
For sure. I found the, so we trust it only so much, but the Wikipedia definition of mixing engineer So I can read you the top little bit of that. And it actually does a pretty good job of kind of explaining. A mixing engineer, or simply mix engineer, is responsible for combining or mixing different sonic elements of an auditory piece into a complete rendition, whether in music, film, or any other content of auditory nature. The finished piece, recorded or live, must achieve a good balance of properties such as volume, pan, positioning, and other effects, while resolving any arising frequency conflicts from various sound sources. These sources can comprise of different musical instruments or vocals in a band, orchestra, dialogue, or Foley in a film, and more.
And you didn't even need to listen to this podcast. You could have just went on Wikipedia.
Yeah,
So,
well, that's what we're here for, to know what to Google, right?
yeah. Welcome to the Google podcast.
Exactly.
How to Google.
But that's a one of those things, while resolving any arising frequency conflicts from various sound sources. That's just like a really good way of saying, hey, EQ stuff. Like, that's a good...
Or dynamic stuff.
Or dynamic,
if you're side-chaining something, like...
You want it to have that desired effect. Yeah, it needs to sit in a certain place in the song. Like, that guitar needs to feel, or that vocal needs to feel behind me. The guitar needs to feel like it's punching me in the face. Like, those kind of things that you can't necessarily track into a mix. That's something that has to be massaged out of a mix.
Right. Like, if you want like a super dusty vocal sound, right? Think of like Billie Eilish. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Very dry.
If you sat very dry, not a ton of top end.
Very up close, like in your face, like she's like right in front of you.
Or like she's right in your ear. Like,
yeah.
Phineas did not send those tracks to whoever mixed it. I forget the guy's name. He did an incredible job. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't just like, yeah, it's a pop song.
Yeah.
Because communication is key. And he said, hey, I already have these basically mixed, so just make them sit right.
Yep.
And to me, a good producer is able to send your tracks out for mixing with all of the creative choices and the general idea of what the band wants or artist already printed. Mm-hmm. That is what a good producer is to me.
Yep.
And that really smacked me in the face because I got Nail the Mix simply to get the Doomed session by Bring Me the Horizon. And I remember going through that and I was like, oh my goodness, these guitars sound pre-mixed. These vocals are almost done. You know, and I'm going through and I realized, wow, like this is what a producer actually does.
But then also you watch. So if you don't know what Nail the Mix is, Nail the Mix is cool. Nail the Mix is run by the homies, and it is a monthly mixing tutorial kind of thing. So where you essentially get the stems from a song every single month, a new song. You can download the stems from songs like Bring Me the Horizon, like what he said, Doomed. Like, I love, that was one of my top tier sessions that I watched. And another one that I really enjoyed was Prayer Position by Periphery. They're generally rock and metal type music. So
dude, they have not to interrupt, but like they have the Story So Far session on there.
Dude, yes.
That was eye-opening to how bad I was at engineering drums, and it made me get better.
Angels and Airwaves too is also like,
oh yeah, that one's on there.
Top tier. So you can download these individual stems, hear what they're the raw files. They're not like pre-mixed by the mix engineer. They are what the mix engineer got. And they are raw files, so you can hear what they sound like. And honestly, just being able to do that is worth the price.
Because then you're going to understand, so everything up to here is what the recording engineer and the producer did.
This is what it takes to
and
sound,
then you listen to the final
good.
Product, and you're like, wow, so that's what the mix engineer does.
Exactly. And then what they also do is they film a walkthrough of the mixing process of that song with the mix engineer. Yep. So, for instance, with Doomed by Bring Me the Horizon, Dan Lancaster did a 9-hour mixing session, and I love watching. I'm probably gonna go watch that like this week or something
I
because
think I'm gonna watch that too because I never watched it.
I love going back and watching when you watch what he does to just make that track sit so well.
Yeah.
It kind of blows your mind at the simplicity. There's also some really interesting like sample choices and usage there because it's it's very subtle.
I did see some sessions from him. I saw like the YouTube clips of that.
Yeah, it's very
and he's
subtle.
really crazy because he's the kind of guy who will pull up like Wave's audio track and he's like, this is such a lovely sounding plugin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He
You know what audio track is? That's like the most transparent sounding thing in the world. And he's like, this is lovely. Like he is probably the most like bare bones like EQ compressor. Like this is, I'm good. You know, like he's that kind of mixer. Nolly is like that too.
Exactly.
Where they're all about just having tools that they're comfortable with using and they're easy to use. And like, yeah, like he is 100% the real deal.
Dan uses the majority, and this is like for all of you like newer people, learn your stock plugins. Dan uses majority either Audio Track, which is a really basic $20 or $15 Waves plugin, but
I might go re-download that.
It's amazing. I actually use it.
I don't have it right
too.
now.
It's an all-in-one EQ compression de-esser plugin, but also he uses stock Pro Tools EQ. Like majority of the time, he uses stock Pro Tools EQ7 and EQ1 across that entire session.
Yep. I loved, and like, I don't know if this is just like me being more familiar with the Pro Tools plugins, because like when I switched to Cubase, it's like a lot of their stock plugins didn't work quite as well as the Pro Tools stuff did because I know it so well.
Yeah.
So naturally I resorted back to like the third-party plugins that I'm familiar with, but there's just something about Pro Tools stock plugins, and I do miss them because I mean I was so quick with them. I was so familiar.
Yeah.
You know, I remember I got a new like SSL style EQ, and I still boot up the Waves one, even though the Waves one does sound worse. Still use it because I'm quicker. You know.
Yeah. You know how to make it sound the way
same. you
know how to make it sound the way you want it to faster.
Exactly.
The big part of the big takeaway in this is being able to take a song that already sounds great, but make it sound great. And this is something I think you said in the beginning. Make it sound great everywhere. Because here's the thing. You might listen to a song on your nice speaker system and be like, oh yeah, this sounds great. And then you listen into your car and you can hear maybe just the drums and that's about it. Because everything's so loud and it's compressing super weird and like the frequencies aren't allowing the vocal to come through and the guitars just sound real strange and the cymbals are way too loud and the room is way too loud and like you can't hear that really cool lead line that you wrote like because it's getting covered up by everything else. And then you listen to maybe like your headphones or your AirPod and everything's just way too brittle and harsh. You know what I mean? Like, or your low end's just non-existent or way too much and it's making the whole track sound like it's underwater.
Yep.
Like being able to make the song sound amazing and work cohesively across how many ever tracks that you have is awesome, but also making it work cohesively and sound awesome in every single listening environment is, in my opinion, like the quintessential. You kind of getting into mastering engineer space a little bit too there.
Well, I mean the terms, yeah, but it's still not the same process, and we'll have a separate episode for that. Because to me, I think like a good mix engineer, whenever the mastering engineer gets it, they should be like, oh, it just needs to be louder.
Yeah, this needs to be louder, and like the top end could be a little different, or like for color, like they just know what color they're going for. Like I'm gonna run it through this piece of gear because it has this like darker color or more hi-fi, like very poppy sounding color, or
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like different flavors.
And we're actually going to have a mastering engineer on here to talk about that because neither of us are proper mastering guys.
Definitely not a mastering engineer by any means.
I'm not. To be honest with you, the chain that has got me the most success is one that I took from one of my favorite producers. Yeah. And then I modified it as the years go on. And it's just like, I'm good enough to get by, but every single person that hires me to mix, I'm like, we should probably outsource the mastering.
Yeah. Oh, I always outsource to mastering. Once again, everybody eats. we always I don't like to be greedy, and I like to spread the love, as they say. If I'm gonna get a project, if I'm gonna get a project, I mean, I sent you some work too, like recently, like, if I'm working on a project and I'm like, it's gonna lack in this area, gonna send it to somebody that I know that's really good, that kills. Because I think that is
all about making good art.
Exactly.
Yeah. See, for me, it's more like, at the end of the day, it's not even like I would do these things if they were paying me. It's just simply, I like mixing whenever it's my own stuff and it's for fun.
Yeah.
I don't like mixing when someone's paying me a lot of money to do it.
Yeah, I could see that.
Because I'll listen to it and then I'll listen to someone else's and I'm like, why didn't they just go to him? He was a few $100s more, Yeah. And, so for me, it's not about, even just like, these people are better. It's just the fact that I flat out don't want to do it because I hate the anxiety of it.
Yeah. I could totally understand that. For me, I know, and for me, it really depends. So it's like, I know for a fact that when it comes to certain, like a lot of the hip hop stuff I work on, I kind of mix that stuff as I go. The way I produce a lot of that stuff, it mostly gets mixed as I'm working. I'm kind of mixing as I'm making the track because I want it to sit a certain way. So by the time we're fully done with the song, I maybe spend 15 or 20 minutes on the actual mixing process. Like I'll listen to the song once fully, literally write down like notes for myself, like mix notes for myself, like I'm communicating to a mix engineer, and then go through, kind of knock off the little tweaks that I hear that need to happen, and then I'll listen through it a second time, make some on the fly changes, listen to it a third time. I'm generally pretty much done. But when it comes to rock stuff that's a little more intricate, a little more complicated, I mean, I do it. I definitely, I get hired all the time to mix just because I think I'm pretty solid at it. I am definitely not top tier by any means. My production work, I think is top tier, and I will stand by that forever.
Same here. 100%. Like, if, like, as a writer and as like a producer, I know for a fact that if an artist came to me and was like, hey, like, I want to book up a bunch of time and you're going to write me a record and like we're going to make it great, like, I know it could stand up to like my favorite artists.
Yeah.
But for like my mix,
yeah, we're hiring that out for sure. Yeah, we're gonna
hire that out.
Yeah, for sure. No, and I totally get that. Like, I think, I've had to mix my own band stuff. It's definitely not my favorite stuff that I've put out. It's definitely not. I mean, I think it's pretty good, but I don't think it's my favorite.
I didn't know that you mixed your own band stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I mixed.
So you're actually like really good at this. You're way better than me.
The most recent 2 Harm singles, I did both of those.
Dang, dude, I'm gonna have to listen to them.
Yeah, they're okay. I like them. I mean, I think they're good. That's the thing. Is it's like it comes to a point of like I am fully confident in like you, I feel fully confident in my arranging and sound design and production skills.
Yeah. Well, you know what's also funny is I'm actually very confident in my mixing skills if it's like borderline deathcore. Like, it has to be super, super heavy, and I know I'll be able to knock the mix out of the park.
And I think that's the thing.
Know that I can mix alt rock. Those are the two things. It either has to be super, super heavy. However, I hate just flat out deathcore. So it has to be borderline deathcore.
Yeah.
And it has to be alt rock or like even like 80s vibes where there's a lot of saturation. It sounds like it was run through a tape machine and run over by a car. Like that is my bread. Like I'll mix that. I will mix that all day, every day until I die.
For sure.
It's everything else that isn't that.
Yeah. For me, it's more so like I feel confident in my like hip hop and like trappy pop mixes, like that kind of stuff that I do. But like I feel less confident in more of my rock mixes, which is fine because like I don't necessarily want to be the guy that's known for rock mixes. I do want to get better because I want to know how to make that train. I want to either get better for the people that want to hire me for that stuff. I'm always trying to get better for that. Or number two, be able to get better to make my stuff translate better for other people who are mixing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I don't work on all my stuff, so my mixes get better. I get better, so my mixing engineer gets it. Mm-hmm. You know, because like if I could just get it 80% there and then someone just gets it the other 20%, great. Yep. Now we're both so happy because this mix engineer is like, I just spent 20 minutes on a song. And, you know, I'm happy because I didn't have to try to explain my whole life story for a mix engineer to understand what we want, you know?
Yeah.
And exactly. So that's really the whole thing for me. And, you know, I've got it to the point where my super heavy tracks and like my 80s inspired and alt rock tracks, it's like, sure, like I'd be happy to release them, just send them to a mastering engineer, you know?
For sure.
But yeah, no, I totally get that where, you know, I'm always working on my mix template and my mixing skills simply to make everybody else's life easier because I just want things to translate better.
Exactly. And I think actually, that's a great place. This is a great point to end on. Keep working on your skills. So if you are a producer or a mixer in the roles that we've defined, like it's fine to be both. We're both in some cases. We're not both in some other cases. Like definitions are just, they kind of don't matter. They're just easier ways for you to wrap your mind around what you're trying to do. And it's easier ways so that you can explain to a client who understands even less about what you're trying to do, like explaining it to a way that they can come to an understanding so that when you say, oh, I'm $1,000, well, that's a lot of money. Okay, well, you know, you can say, okay, well, in this process, it is involved with hiring out people if that's your choice, or I'm going to have to do all the tracking, the songwriting with you, all of the editing, and the mixing, and then we're gonna have to send it out to a mastering engineer who's, you know, $100 or $50 per song. So that's where so it's easier for you to understand like where to reach out to people, where you specialize, so that when you reach out to other people, they know where you specialize. That's a huge thing. That was a huge thing for me too, being able to say, hey, producer ABCD, like I know you do your own stuff and that's awesome. I know you do your own mixes. That's great. But if you ever need a guy to just do post-production, you know, if you ever need a guy to just do editing, sometimes being the guy that does one of those jobs can be a way for you to double down and really start turning it into a regular job and not just a side hobby.
Absolutely.
So keep practicing everything.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I see that all the time, you know, and like, you know, we all have our strengths that we practice and we get really, really good at. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, if you're able to improve on other areas, then you're able to help the people who are even better because now they're being sent higher quality stuff. Mm-hmm. Or you're able to communicate what you actually want even better. And that's insanely important.
And also understand what's being communicated to you.
Yeah, that's good.
So it's a communication both ways. Being able to communicate to somebody what you're looking for, but also when somebody's trying to communicate something and you can fully understand it without having to be, walked through a really long, drawn out process.
Yep.
So keep getting better. Always push yourself and find some places that you feel like you're weak. And, I'm probably going to go work on some mixing this week. Try and get better.
I think I might do that too. I made one good mix in like the past 3 months that I like really think stack up to like my idols. Just one for like my idols. But they also have like a good 15 years on me. So
yeah, exactly.
It's okay. It's okay. I'll get there one day. But
it comes
just
in time.
Not today.
Well, yeah. Sounds like we're all going to go practice. But thanks for listening. Thanks for coming and hanging out. I hope you kind of learned some stuff. This is more of like a general information kind of episode. And, if you're new to the whole like bedroom producer music world, like some of this stuff is probably pretty new to you. So we're just trying to make sure that it's explained well so that when someone asks you, oh, are you a producer? You can fully answer them correctly. Or, hey, do you mix? Yes or no. Like you now have a better understanding of what that is. So that this is something we talked about throughout this whole episode, so that we can communicate better to give people better art.
Exactly.
And that's what it's all about. So thanks for coming. Thanks for hanging out. Josh. Peace.
Peace.
And that's it for this episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Go check us out on Instagram at Home Studio Hangout. Give us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. And don't forget, keep on creating. See you next week.